The most dangerous prison is the one you don't know that you're in. Today, billions of people live as debt slaves, bounding not by chains, but by financial systems designed to extract their labor and their wealth. How do we allow this to happen is a big question. And how did borrowing currency, a seemingly harmless act, become the foundation of a system that systematically transfer wealth from those that have it to those that don't? In this video, I want to share some thoughts and unpack how the mechanics of debt has become such a problem that you should consider it a national security risk for your own financial sakes, and explore the devastating impact it has on society, and how it's imperative that everyone needs to wake up and realize that there's an urgent need for systemic change, or else. Let's talk about this one. All right, so I want to take a quick minute, share some thoughts in reference to the current debt fiasco that President Trump has inherited, as well as has added to over his previous administration as well, and how some of the events that we're going to experience are unsolvable. And then again, it's not until you actually look at the numbers and see how large they are that you can understand how no matter what comes out of DC, no matter what a politician says, it is too late. The only thing that we can do is literally strategize or how we can avoid as much risk as possible before something unfortunately unfolds that will catch the majority of people by surprise. So in this video here, I want to share some thoughts, share some numbers, share some figures, share some graphs, more importantly. And of course, do all this to educate people and to keep them sharp and on their toes so they realize the bigger picture outside of the everyday signatures and executive orders and all that stuff that's taking place now that ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything, because at the end of the day, it's all about our national security, which has been in danger because of the same people that's in DC right now. And it has everything to do with your purchasing power. As always, if you guys want to see more of these, definitely hit that thumbs up button to show your support for the channel. And no doubt you'll have something to say. Drop a comment down below so more people can learn from other individuals such as yourself as well. And then if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you never miss one of these little deep dives that I like to share every so often. But I want us talking about the obvious, or maybe it's not. Here on the screen here, we have the most recent figures of all sectors when it comes to debt. And as I zoom in here, you can see that it's debt securities and loans that make up government liabilities. And of course, these liabilities happen to be denominated in our national currency. And this is the risk that I'm talking about, that is systemic in nature and a threat to our national security, and more importantly, your financial stability. As you can see here on this chart, this graph depicts what has occurred ever since it started to remove off the zero mark, going back to 1971-ish. And we all know what happened, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But as a result of this is where we stand today, the diminishing of our purchasing power. So this is the visual aid minus all the presidents I typically show. But as you can see on the screen here, this is consumer price index for all urban consumer purchasing power of the consumer dollar in the U.S. city average. And so I love using these visual aids just because it does a good job of highlighting the gradual debasement or the compounding effect of debt and how disaster it is for everyday Americans as well as the world. And the most shocking part of all of this is that nobody really focuses on this right now. As of right now, all the euphoria is about President Trump and all the executive orders and the releasing of the JFK files and all the stuff that's supposed to come out, as if it actually has anything to do with putting more purse power back into your pockets. And that is something that's a part of this deceptive trap that's being set right now that most people are either ignoring because they don't want to face the reality, or they just completely uninformed. Either one, you take a pick. But if you zoom into this chart here, you can see that since 1913, when the Federal Reserve was created, the Federal Reserve instrument, also known as a dollar, not the only dollar at that particular time circulate, had a valuation or a weight in comparison to this index here of over 1,000. And then as you look at all the gray bars throughout the last 100+ years, which indicate the recessions, here we are now down to the point where there's not much left here. And the most concerning part is as if I zoom in here, and you can see at this current moment, as of December, this past year, we're only working with 31.7%. And that's according to their figures. So you might wonder why I'm actually mentioning all this. It's because to me, and I'm sure to you, if you really knew how problematic this is going to be, would you consider this a national security threat to your financial future as well? When your currency has gone down to 31.7 and it's nowhere near where it's going to end up, because Donald Trump will be the last president under this Federal Reserve structure. And it has everything to do with the fact that there's a new system in play that he already knows about, and that those that surround him are actually working towards accomplishing in this next 4-year period. And so that's why I'm talking about the debt issue and the national security threat in your interests. One of the problems that I want to highlight is that in the mid-1990s, total debt across the U.S. economy was approximately about 20 trillion or so. And that puts us about right here on this line, on this liability chart here. And as we can see, since then, things have gotten out of control. So you fast forward to today, and the number skyrocketed to over $101 trillion. It's good to say it's going to go a lot higher under Donald Trump, because that's how the system operates. And so that's an 80 trillion or so increase in just 3 decades. And that's an accomplishment that can only be described as financial insanity. So what does that mean? Every dollar of debt represented on our promise of future labor and wealth has been siphoned from individuals, businesses, and governments to lenders. A good way of looking at it is to take a mortgage as an example. You have a 400,000 mortgages, and you factor in, say, interest rates about 6.9 to 7% over a 30-year period. That equates to $556,000 that will be paid in interest alone. You essentially bought 2 houses for the price of 1, which basically is you bought 1 for yourself, and then you also bought 1 for the bank. This dynamic plays out on every level. From households drawing in credit card debt to governments paying billions in interest to holders. And at the end of the day, who benefits? The financial elite. Those who've engineered this entire structure to perpetuate their dominance in the global economy and beyond. Where has that left society? Literally, the idea of globalization has led to a decline in the American labor in of itself, because that isn't only a tool being used to suppress the middle and working class, it's the rise of the global elite that has fundamentally devalued American labor by using and leveraging debt through the creation of artificial currency to accomplish their goals. Once upon a time, the U.S. economy thrived with a string of middle-class, hard-working individuals that was powered by the sweat and equity of the workers, who were rewarded with what was considered fair wages at the time, as well as opportunities to be able to grow and to dream beyond what they had at that current moment. That was what they call the American dream. But those days are long gone. And so now we got global corporations that have been meeting at the White House. And let's look no further to the recent announcement of the $500 billion Stargate AI project. We have all those uber wealthy individuals surrounding Donald Trump, and they're all excited about the future that they're going to build, which eventually they're going to benefit from our costs. So ultimately, driven by profit, they've shifted the American manufacturing and production to countries where workers own fractions of what they used to pay here. And I'm not quite sure how creating a Stargate AI facility outside of the 100,000 supposedly jobs it's going to create, how that's going to be sustainable when they're creating that same tech to replace the same individuals that's helped building it out. But then again, that's the world we live in. And so U.S. workers are now competing against global labor costs as well as software. There's no win for anybody here other than the uber wealth. So automation and I have compounded this problem, rendering many traditional jobs basically null and void. And so the numbers speak for themselves. By 1950, CEOs earned roughly 30 times the average salary of their workers. Today, the figure has ballooned to over 268 times, give or take. And if that isn't a wealth gap, I'm not sure what is. What that says is they have all the benefits at the expense of those that work for them. Ultimately, where to leave us. In a nutshell, a nation in decline, regardless of all the hype and hope coming out of DC right now. And the most heart-wrenching consequence of all this is the effect on the children. So currently about 60% or so of the kids live in poverty in this country. At the same time, we have the wealthiest country on the planet. And that's about 14 million or so that rely upon food stamps just to get by. And at some point, before adulthood, about 50% of those same children are expected to rely upon food assistance themselves when they become adults. You got this big wealth gap that continues to grow, where the bottom of the Americans control about 2.5% of the wealth. And then the number of millionaires have nearly tripled since 2009. And that's clearly a disparity that's resulting in hard work and ingenuity of the actual working class itself dissipating over time as all that wealth has been transferred to the top. And so it's an outcome of a system that was designed to funnel wealth work from day one. And so ultimately, this current moment, something needs to give. And unfortunately, it's going to be our currency, which is the natural threat. And so clearly they know that's why they're using and getting the last remaining bit of purchasing power that they can out of the currency before it's rebranded into something else. And we all know what that's going to be. So I'm not going to touch on that. But this current moment, what needs to change is every single thing. So we can't continue to go down the same path and expect things to turn out differently. So the debt-based financial system must be reformed or else. And the American economy must prioritize workers over corporate profits. But then again, you shouldn't expect that. So what should happen is you should prioritize your own investment to yourself and your education and your productivity for humanity, because the government's not going to do nothing for you. That means ultimately, as a country, we're going to have to reject the endless push for free trade, which exploits the global market of labor, which will ultimately shift all the manufacturing back into the hands where the labor is the cheapest. And it won't be here in America. And so we need to start demanding accountability from these financial institutions as well as the governments, because they're the ones benefiting off of government's policies. Now that we got the rise of AI and automation, this poses an existential threat to jobs and the restructuring of society in general, just because if people don't work, they'll lose their sense of purpose and meaning in a world that circulate around society and community and family. But then again, amongst all this, offers some opportunity for those who are aware and looking in between all these changes that's underway on how they can get involved wherever they can, according to their own areas of expertise. Just at the end of the day, we'll wrap this up, keep it sweet and simple. The system clearly is broken. You see it where we see an exponential debt curve that can't stop or else, as well as the currency, which is literally gas on air as it dwindles down from 31.7 to 0. And it clearly appears that the system that has been designed intentionally is working according to the ones that constructed it. And unfortunately, it's not benefiting the average person, but the elite instead. But we don't have to accept this, thank God. More awareness is growing. People are actually taking matters to their own hands in small pockets. And with that, eventually will come the demand for change. Because as of recently, with Donald Trump and his announcement of the Stargate and then all the things associated with it, including the health stuff, more of his fan base has started to push back and demand accountability, meaning that they don't want none of the things that they voted him in for. So we'll see if he backtracks and does anything different or else. And if he doesn't, then for a fact, he was never your man's in the first place. So the question is, will we act before it's too late? Will we continue to voice our displeasure with this system they set up? Or will we be silent and think that giving us some executive orders and unleashing some old files on people who died 50, 60 years ago will really change the future? Once again, these are things that people should be wondering about, and these are some questions that people need to start asking. And if they don't, oh, too bad. But as always, taking a minute, share some thoughts, put together some of the pieces of the puzzle to lay out a framework so that people can see what the real threat is, because you'll never hear the word purchasing power coming from Donald Trump or any of his colleagues around him at this current moment, because they're going to use that to their advantage, because that is the system. So in the meantime, you know what you have to do. Get your weight up, and you know how to do that. You got gold, silver, as well as other tangible assets that's meant to be wealth preservation tools. And if you need more information as to what they are, I tell you all the time, the links are in the description. And other than that, here's to hear what you think. If you found value, hit that thumbs up, drop a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.